Hi all, welcome. Ryan here from the London Craftsman channel. How are you? Today is all about a video comparing two ways of rounding over your work, taking that arris off those sharp corners. Basically, it's called man versus machine because man with a chamfer plane against the machine. You get it? Yeah. Hence the reason I named the video Man versus Machine. Right, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about all the pros and cons of both. These are both very good ways of rounding over your work and taking those sharp corners off. Both do the job fantastically. There aren't any major flaws in any of them, but I'm going to be going over all the pros and cons. I've got a whole list of them right here on my little scribbles, and on top of that I'm going to be just showing you 4 materials. I'm going to be trying both the hand plane and the router on a piece of MDF, veneered MDF, birch ply and solid timber. So if that floats your boat, you want to find out more, you want to see how these two perform, better stay tuned, watch to the end, and I hope you enjoy. So before we get into it, if you like my content and you found it useful and you've taken something away, please subscribe. That means such a lot to me. What we have here is the routers, and I've used them all. We started off first with the corded version, the corded Makita, which works fantastic. It's a nice quiet palm router. And we just felt that the cord got in our way when we were just doing long pieces. And so we were using that for a couple of years. And then we kind of moved on to this one. This is a Katsu router. And there's a little bit of debate about the Katsu router. I've had good and bad feedback from this. We've only had good feedback. It's only like a 60 quid router off Amazon, and it fits Makita batteries, which we had some lying around, and it works fantastic. It looks exactly like the Makita version. And to be honest, for me, it performs exactly like the Makita version. The only downside with it, I think, that I've noticed as this clip is a little bit cheapy. It still does the job, but it doesn't look as substantial as the Makita version. But yeah, we moved over to the battery version just because we were just a lot more free. We didn't have a cord in the way. And yeah, it worked really, really well. Feel free to use the trend version. This is the T18S. You can take this part off and just have it as a palm router. We decided that if we are trimming anything at all using the trimmer, the cutter version, then we'd be aiming to use the Katsu, or you could use your DeWalt or your Makita or anything like that, any brand that you've got. Moving over to the hand plane, we've got the Mahogany, and it's a nice, well-made piece. It's quite heavy and substantial. Everything is well-made. It just feels quality when you pick it up. And yeah, like I said, it's got a little bit of weight to it. It's got quite a bit of adjustment. So these little knobs here, you can have the blades sticking out as little or as far as you want. You've got 2 on here. So you've got the round over. You can see that one's got a curve on the blade, whereas this one hasn't. It's a complete straight. So this one would give you a proper chamfer, you know, a flat chamfer, and this one would just give you a nice round on the corner. And you can go anywhere from sort of like literally just taking the arris off ever so slightly so you don't have a sharp edge, tiniest amount, all the way up to a pencil round on this. There is quite a lot of adjustment. These two do the upwards and downwards of the blades, and this one locks it. As you can see, it's got the little angle there, so it runs in that section. So that section will just sit on your work like so, and then you just push it through. So this one is quite a hard one to judge because they both do a very good job, but you know, they both have their pros and cons, which I'm going to go over right now. Before I do that, I just want to show you the cutter that we use for the routers, okay? It's 1/4 inch and it just looks like this. It's Diddy. You can just see that little round. And we use Trend now, but you can buy all different brands. You can buy them from Maxminster, but I do recommend Trend. I'll leave a description for these in the links below and everything else. So I've got it all written down on scribbles on this piece of paper. I could have scripted it, but I'll just sound like a robot. So yeah, let me read these off, the pros and cons that I've thought about over time, and yeah, what my thoughts are. So we're going to start with the router and the cutters, okay? So the 1.6mm round over cutters. So my pros with this is it's multi-purpose. So what I mean by multi-purpose is you can literally put any cutter in there and it'll do a handful. It'll do dozens and dozens of different jobs for you. Another one is that you don't get any breakout when you're going to the end of the piece. I feel that as you're just routering with a 1.6mm cutter anyway, as you're getting to the end of the piece, even if you're going across the grain, it's very unlikely that you're going to get a bit of grain of the veneer chipping out or anything like that. So yeah, they are the pros. I'm going to go over the cons now of the router. So my thoughts were they are quite expensive compared to just getting this, okay? If you are buying, for example, again, I'm going to use Katsu, you're going to need a charger, you're going to need the battery, and you're going to need the actual router itself. Plus, by the time you've used the cutter for a couple of months or it gets dull, realistically, you're not going to get it sharpened, or you can sharpen it. I generally don't. You're going to buy another cutter. They're about 20, 25 pounds. It's probably easier just to buy one rather than sharpening it, in my view anyway. I've never sharpened a cutter in my life. So that is a con. It's the setup of the machine itself and replacing the cutters. Another con is at the bottom of the base, it can sometimes scratch your work, we found. But that only is if, if they're slightly worn or you've damaged it in some way. But we generally don't have that problem, but it can occur, so just be aware of that. With the router, it kicks up dust, doesn't it? So the 1.6mm hardly takes anything off. It's the smallest amount, but it still brings up dust, so you're gonna have to wear your mask. And whereas this, it comes more off as one whole solid piece. It doesn't throw it in the air. If you are doing it on MDF, the hand plane, then it generally just drops to the floor. So the cons of this is the dust. So one other con is that they're noisy. So obviously this is noise free, these aren't. And that generally depends on what brand you use. Some are better than others. I found that this was the quietest one, the mains one, whereas these two are relatively noisy of the motor. Plus when you're skimming work off, believe it or not, the 1.6mm, it makes a horrible noise as you're going through. So ear defenders on, dust mask on, and yeah, that is a con. I want to mention one other thing. They are quite heavy, and they are surprisingly heavy. I don't know what that would be, 1.5 kilos, 2 kilos, something like that. So every time you want to use it, you've got that ease of use. Whenever you're working, you want it to be nice and easy, whereas you're picking it up every time you're putting it back down. Leading on to picking it up and putting it down all the time. With this particular one, you need to press the unlock button first before you press the power, and it's the same on the Makita. I find that a bit annoying. The Trend does the same thing as well, lock, unlock, don't know why. This one isn't, the mains one is just a switch on and off, so that is a little bit easier in those terms, but then again, you've got the cord. Con for these is that when you do set these 1.6mm radius cutters, they are very, very fussy. It's like give or take 1/10 of a millimeter. If you go down too far, you get a little line on the round over. So we've done the pros and cons on the router side, the machine side. Let's move on to the Hongdui chamfer plane. Right, so we're going to start with the pros again with this. So for me, the pros are that it's quick. You just pick it up and just run it through. Nice and easy. So that is a decent pro, isn't it? It's lightweight, hardly weighs anything compared to the machines. 200-300 grams, I don't know. It's quite light. Changing blades, so you can change blades relatively fast compared to these. So to release these blades, all you need to do is get yourself a star key, just twist that off, and these little blades, these square blades come off, but you do have two, one either side, so you just swap it round 180 and you've got yourself a nice fresh cut. Another thing to mention, which I really like about these, is that it can go from anything from an arris, just that small edge, very fractional, all the way up to a pencil round. And it's got such a lot of adjustment. On the one side, it's got millimeters, so you've got 0 to 5mm on both. And on the other side, it reads in inches, so 0 to 1/32 of an inch. Another thing is that this does a chamfer as well as a round over. So you can just see the flat blade on this. This one's got a cutout in this. So that's quite cool. This also is dust free, isn't it? So when you are taking that waste off, especially with solid, or maybe if you're going with the grain on a veneer, it's just going to come off as one solid piece and it'll just fall to the floor. So you're generally not going to have to wear a dust mask or anything like that. It's also noise free, so no need to wear ear defenders. So dust free and noise free, no mask, no ear defenders. Obviously the mask in your workshop is up to you, as you've generally got dust floating around anyway. And one other thing is it gives a great finish. So depending on what you were using it for, when I go into the cons of this machine, it's going to give you a nice crisp finish. So if I'm going to be talking about the cons of this, so it's not great for veneer across the grain. It's good with the grain, but across it, you generally get that tearing effect, whereas these don't give you that. So I'd say that's a con. So anything like a veneer or a birch ply, but I couldn't really think of any other cons for this hand plane. So I haven't got anything else written down. Maybe you might know if you've been using it, but for me, that is the only con in my eyes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you both the machine and the hand chamfer plane on a piece of MDF, walnut veneer, birch ply, and solid mahogany. So number one, we've got the chamfer plane sort of set up to the same setting as the router, about 1.6 mil, and it's on a piece of MDF. This one is walnut veneer. This one is birch ply going against the grain. And solid mahogany. Okay, so I didn't have any sharp edges left on that last MDF sample, so I've got another piece. Walnut veneer. Birch against the grain. And last, solid mahogany. Right, so on to the results. And to be honest, there's not much difference between the both of them. Like I said, you can weigh up the pros and cons, like noise, cost, dust, all that sort of stuff to make your preference, or you can buy the both. But yeah, I haven't found that there is a great deal. Okay, let's talk about the results. I think I'm going to struggle to show you the results because the round over is so small. You need like a human eye to sort of look at them. But first of all, the chamfer plane on the MDF has come out nice and smooth. There is no complaints whatsoever on this. There's no chipping or anything like that. It's smooth all over and it's consistent. So MDF, it's come out really nice. I've got no downsides with the MDF. Moving on to the veneered walnut. And again, we had no problems going with the grain for the walnut with the chamfer plane. Remember, if you are going to be using veneer, you'd probably edge this first. I didn't go across the grain, but we did go across the grain with the birch, so I'll show you that next. So I've got no tearing out at all. It's smooth as a baby's bottom. It's lovely. Again, no downsides with that. It's come out really, really nice. On to the birch, and yeah, there's hardly anything. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to show you, but it's come out really nice. I mean, tiny, tiny, tiny amount of tearing there, not enough to say don't use it. And we've got a tiny little bit of breakout here, the smallest amount. So this is what I was talking about with the chamfer plane. It can just tear that out ever so slightly. But if you do across the grain first, on types like this, the key is you do across the grain, if you're doing all 4 components, that is. Across the grain, then go with the grain, across the grain, then with the grain. So what you're doing is you're doing it across the grain, you might get a bit of breakout, but then by going with the grain, you're taking that back off, and you're doing the same again, and then taking it back off. So if you are gonna be using this, you can get over it, no problem, I think. It's come out nice, but there is a con against the birch ply. And lastly, let's test on the solid. So yeah, you probably can't see this very well. It feels slightly rough, like it's torn it. And you know, this is quite a dense timber, and you generally, it's quite stable as well. So it's generally quite good at machining mahogany, but I feel like that it has torn it out a bit. Maybe I might have been going too fast. But overall, I'd say that's a con against the chamfer plane. Slight tearing with solid. So that is the chamfer plane, a couple of cons against it. So let's move on to the router. So with the MDF, it's come out really, really nice. We've got a nice round over there. It's smooth, no complaints against that. Yeah, and this is what we used to do back in the day, constantly over and over and over again, miles of it every week. And yeah. Really, really nice with the router there. The walnut veneer, how's that fare? Again, you can't really see. Feels a little bit lumpy and bumpy. Maybe, you know, one thing to mention is that wherever the wheel is rubbing up against, that is the pattern that you're gonna get. And obviously I did it up against the machined factory edge here. So maybe that's why it feels ever so, you know, I'm being really fussy here. It's still a nice round over, and when you have finished any round over, you want to swipe it with sandpaper anyway. So any imperfections you do get that I'm telling you about, you know, you can get over them with P240. But that is the only con against this right now, is the lumpy feel, and I think that is just down to the machined factory edge. So the router with the birch ply, it's come out really nice. I'd say that's perfect. If anything, we've got no breaking out or tearing out. Let's see on this edge, this is where it finished. So yeah, happy with that. Nothing bad to say against the birch and the router. And lastly, the router on the solid. So yeah, that feels crisp. Compared to the chamfer plane, where you had the tear out, this feels really nice. It feels like a nice, well-made component now. You know, when you take the arris off a piece of solid, it always changes the way it feels. Yeah, happy with that. I'd be using the router all day long with the solid. So they are the results. Probably not what you were thinking, and probably gonna see massive differences between the two. They are both very good. I started saying that at the beginning. They're both very good, and you can get away with any of them on any materials. I just think the pros and cons that I read through, like the noise and all that sort of stuff, is what you want to sort of weigh up. One thing I would want to say is, for ease of use, you know, every day using a tool over and over again, you want it to be as easy as possible. If you're doing it constantly, day in, day out, as we do, we might do, I don't know, 200, 300, 400 meters of taking off arris every single day. And so for us, just picking this up, nice and easy, done. Rather than picking it up, it feels a bit weighty, pressing 2 buttons and then guiding that heavy machine through. That's probably the difference between the two, the man and the chamfer, and the machine of the router. So there's my summary. Hopefully I've covered everything. If I haven't, leave a message, tell me where I've gone wrong, and hopefully I'll improve on my next video. Other than that, guys, I hope you enjoyed. If you have, like and subscribe as usual. Take it easy. Have a good rest of the day. Ciao for now.